Catherine. I want to start with gratitude, just like Catherine did with Doug and Giselle and their daughter Elise, who's here, and I think there's some grandkids running around back there, but pretty exciting. If there's people that have just rolled in, we got seats available. Come on in, because you probably can't even hear us out there. Lots of room. Is this like North Dakota, where everyone's like, it's amazed that there's some people in the front row, thank you. And then there's a few more back, and then there's some like in the next room. But feel welcome to come in, we got room for you in here. But I would just say, again, we lead with gratitude always in North Dakota. Every time we start a meeting, we lead with gratitude. There's so much to be grateful for in this country. Catherine touched a little bit on sort of why we're here and how we got into the race in North Dakota. But in that, when I take a look at the best of America, there's a lot of great things that are happening. We saw it yesterday in the parade in Amherst, streets lined with patriotic people that care about the future of the country. And we see it everywhere we go. I mean, when we were in Iowa this week for the, a parade there on July 3rd, and going up and down all the parade booths, and here's a recovery group, and here's a group that's, a veterans group, and here's the local library, and here's the pet rescue. I mean, everybody's doing something great locally, but often all we hear about is what's wrong with this country. But there are some great things happening with neighbors helping neighbors. But at the same time that's happening, our federal government is going in the wrong direction on three things, and that's what we're running on. One is the economy, whether interest rates, taxes, spending, all of the approach that is happening, the red tape, the regulation that burdens every business, like here at DGF. Everybody we talk to, it's like we're raising the cost of every product. It slows down our competitiveness in the country, what we're doing with the economy, and we've got to cut back on that red tape. In North Dakota, we've been focused on that. We passed 51 out of 52 red tape reduction bills this year in our legislature. We had a website and outreach to the public saying, small businesses, large businesses, what are we doing at the state level that's getting in the way of you being successful? What are we getting in the way of you expanding and growing your opportunities? So very focused on trying to get government out of people's lives and get the economy rolling. Secondly, on energy, the Biden administration doesn't just need a course correction, it actually is going 180 degrees the wrong direction. I mean, you're just gonna say one sentence. Somebody said, what are you doing when you're president? First day, we'll start selling energy to our allies, stop buying it from our adversaries. That's what we're doing right now. We're buying from our adversaries. We got the State Department going to Venezuela, we got the administration going to the Middle East. They're not calling up Texas, Oklahoma, North Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, or Alaska. And I know all those governors, I got them all on speed dial. Nobody's talking to them. They're saying, oh, we're gonna buy it overseas. Okay, but they care about the environment. If you care about the environment, you'd want to have every drop of energy produced in America. We do it cleaner, safer, smarter. We have an EPA. The EPA overreaches. Some of these countries like Venezuela and Russia don't even have the kinds of environmental controls that we argue about here in the United States. So if you care about the environment, you should be insisting that America lead and produce most of the energy in the world, not try to kill the US energy industry. And again, this idea that somehow we're gonna have every vehicle be an electric vehicle when we can't build, you can't get a power line transmission line built or permitted. You can't get it permitted. You know that here in New England. There's been one, they've been trying to get one with green electrons from Quebec Hydro for 10 years through Maine, can't get the power line built. How in the world are we gonna get power to 500,000 EV charging stations? How are we gonna do that? We're gonna subsidize the cars, subsidize the battery, but we can't build the transmission line? You've gotta have a grid. North Dakota, we're right in the center. We send power west through a grid called SPP. We send it east through a grid called MISO. We're a huge electrical exporter. We know how these rules are destabilizing the grid because we live it every day. We see what's happening. And then we say, oh, we'll just get our batteries. Who? From China? 85% of the rare earth minerals are coming from China or countries that they're controlling. So I just say, great, if you want to go battery, we're just going to trade OPEC for Sinopec. And we're just going to lose all of our leverage. Secretary Blinken was over there a couple weeks ago in China, never discussed energy as far as I can tell. I've read every article I can find on that trip. China imports 10 million barrels of oil a day. They are the largest importer of energy in the world. We have so much leverage that we could have if we had true energy independence here in our country. If we unleashed American energy, we would have all kinds of leverage. We wouldn't be, hoping to get a meeting with the president of China. We'd be basically calling the shots, but we're not, because our administration, when they're talking to China, can't talk energy because they're too busy trying to shut down our own industry here. So wrong on economy, wrong on energy. National security. It's tied, I just said it. I mean, the whole thing with China, they're our biggest competitive threat in the world. It's a risk to national security. We're in a Cold War. And if people tell you we're not in a Cold War, then ask them, what does it mean to be in a Cold War? Spy balloons over the country? How about a spy station in Cuba? You know, how about near misses with aircraft and boats, ships in the South China Sea? Just all of this is in the last 2 months. Those of you that are old enough to remember the 1960s, this is what a Cold War is. This is when the tensions are increasing. And we are in and then in Russia, we've sent everything but troops. There's a kinetic war going on in Eastern Europe. We're providing material, training, and money, and we're in that war. And they say, okay, well, we're not going to send troops. Some people are even saying in our own party, they're saying, hey, we don't really care about what happens with Putin. A win for Putin is a win for China. We put sanctions 9 months too late on Russia, saying we're not going to buy your oil. So Putin can't sell oil at the market anymore. His oil is 20-30% off. You know who's buying it all? China. I mean, our sanctions basically give everybody in China a chance to buy gas at 20% off or more. And I'm pretty sure all of you would like to drive to a gas station and say, hey, I want the 20% off deal today. How do I do that? Or if you're a farmer in Iowa or in North Dakota and you want to put diesel in your tractor, you'd like to get 20% off. But so even when we say we're acting tough, we're actually doing things that are hurting our position. A win for Putin is a win for China, and we're just turning Russia into China's gas station, and we're pushing the Middle East away from us when they wouldn't have to be all cozying up to China, but they are with this administration because we're trying to kill our own industry and push all the other oil producers towards China. I mean, it's a disaster. So energy, economy, national security, that's what we're running on. That's what we're focused on, and part of the reason why, that's the job of the President of the United States. The states created the federal government, not the other way around. States created the federal government. New Hampshire was one of those states that signed the Declaration of Independence 247 years ago yesterday, and they said, hey, and when the Constitution was made after that, a little over a decade after that, in the Constitution, here's the role of the federal government, and it's limited, and it says explicitly, and the rest remains at the state. This administration and others prior have all been trying to do the state's job. I've seen it when I was a small business owner. I grew up in a small town in North Dakota. My dad was a World War II Navy vet. He passed away when I was a freshman in high school. And I inherited a small amount of farm ground from my dad. I literally took a mortgage against that dirt, which nobody does. If your grandfather's homesteaded the land, you do not take a loan out in North Dakota. Trust me, that's like a big no-no. It's paid for, don't touch it. I bet the farm, that became the seed capital for a little software company called Great Plains. There's about 10 of us there at the beginning. That thing grew. We had 2,000 team members at the time that we were acquired. We had 1,200 in Fargo, 400 rest of North America, 400 in the rest of the world. We had customers in 132 countries. We had hundreds of thousands of small and medium-sized customers with a bunch of kids from small towns, just like right here. Competing. You give us a chance to compete on the world stage, America can win in any market. Our farmers can win, our manufacturers can win. We just have to make sure we got a level playing field. So I did that, and I understand, but I understand as a teeny business, I understand as a struggling business when we were trying to grow. I remember when I had to not take a paycheck to make sure I could pay my team members. I've been there, what every small business has been through, and I'm sure DGF is, all the years you've been in business, you've had these ups and downs, you go through the cycles, but so I understand what it takes. And every job I had until I was in my mid-20s, working on the farm, working construction, working at the grain elevator, working as a chimney sweep actually to pay my way through college. All those were jobs where I took a shower at the end of the day. Just like the guys that are down here that I met on the shop floor. Guys that are the heart of America that are getting stuff done. We need somebody in the White House that understands what it's like to actually work for a living. We need to have someone who understands what it's like to create a job, not someone who's never created a job before. And we need to understand the global economy because we're competing in a global economy. And so when we decided to jump into this thing, we knew that there was things we can bring, because again, there's business folks that say, hey, I'm a business leader, I want to get into government. Being a governor is the closest thing to being president. You're the chief executive. You get to pull all the levers. You're the commander-in-chief of the National Guard. You're working with all your businesses to streamline all the stuff you're doing. We have been able to get North Dakota completely rocking. We've got the highest workforce participation in the nation. We have virtually almost no one on unemployment in our state. We have the lowest unemployment, along with some other states like New Hampshire, super low on that. We're on track to have the highest GDP in the country, and we are and again, as I said earlier, we're cutting red tape like crazy in our state because that cuts the burden on everybody. So I think, you know, having been in the business market, in the business sector, and been a business leader and been a job creator, I understand where government gets in the way. And we can work to make sure that we stop doing that, because the federal government has got a limited set of responsibilities. Economy is one of those. National security, including border security, is part of those limited responsibilities. And national security includes border security, and as Catherine mentioned, I mean, this crisis we're having, 110,000 overdose deaths in this country. 110,000, that's a statistic that's hard to comprehend. I mean, that's bigger than our capital plus the next, you know, the next two cities that are next to it. That'd be like the whole city of Bismarck and Manhattan wiped out in a year. But, you know, you can't even get your head around it. But we know people, and some of you may too, we know people who've lost a son, a daughter, a niece, a nephew, a mom or a dad to an overdose death, unintentional, because something was laced with fentanyl. And Catherine at Recover Reinvented, which she helped start, you know, 6 years ago, but it wasn't popular. She said, we have to give out Narcan. We have to train everybody. We had, you know, 2,000 people at conference, train everybody. 2 months later, she had some parents come up to her and say, thank you. She said, why? They said, because we found our son unresponsive in the bathroom floor from an overdose, and without the Narcan that we'd gotten free at your event, we would have lost our son. You know, that's a happy ending. But there's about 330 families a day right now. 330 people are dying every day in America from an overdose death that are not having a happy ending. And so we've got to fix that, and that starts with stopping the flow of fentanyl over the southern border. So with that, I'm going to stop. But if you want to know, you know, 3 things about Catherine and I, we care deeply about this country. We care deeply about the people that are here and the workers that work here. And we're going to make sure the federal government does its job around the economy, energy, national security. And with that, I'll stop and take some questions. Sir?
Do you have any idea on how to dismantle the gargantuan federal bureaucracy? It's like a 4th branch of government that is killing us. Is that the president's role?
Well, there's, like I say, when I talk about the overreach, and I've learned about this at the state level. At the state level, you get in, every organization's got a culture, and it turns out the state and the federal level, there's tons of silos, and so there's tons of inefficiencies. And having been a software guy, it was just amazing to me how inefficient it was. When we got into North Dakota, we were simultaneously fighting the Dakota Access Pipeline protest, 10,000 people camping illegally on federal land, trying to block legally permitted infrastructure. And you can't imagine where we would be right now with Russia invading Ukraine if we hadn't successfully built that pipeline. But we're dealing with that. At the same time, we were having a budget crisis because oil prices had gone down, and the prior spending had set North Dakota on a path where we were spending too much money of that oil and gas revenue. We cut $1.7 billion out of a $6 billion general fund budget, and we didn't cut any services. You're like, how is that possible? Well, we cut a bunch of one-time spending, just said we're not doing any of that, and then we went in and said, how can we do stuff more efficiently? And when you have 157 different websites and 157 people that in 2017 were still taking faxes, I mean, like what? We're going to pay a state employee to take a fax off machine and do data entry? I mean, come on. When was the last time you guys faxed somebody an order? I mean, if you've ordered on Amazon or something like that, I think they probably know who you are when you come back. You know, you could live in North Dakota your whole life and be, you know, hey, I got a hunting license, a fishing license, I pay taxes, my kids went to school, and then you want to get a boat license, and we're like, who are you? You know, re-enter all your stuff. I mean, we have to treat, we say we're going to treat customers, we're going to treat taxpayers like the customers they are. Taxpayers pay for the government. They need to be served like customers. And the customer experience when dealing with government is so far behind that everyone's just taking it for granted that it'll never be there. But there's all kinds of ways. So we can cut waste, cut people. There's 2 million people, sir, that work for the federal government. 2 million. We do not need 2 million people working for the federal government. Not when we have 11 million jobs available in the private sector. No one's going to lose a job. We're not creating unemployment. Get them out of the downsize the federal government, return the power to the states. And there are places like at the border where, you know, in North Dakota, we have sent troops down to the border, our North Dakota National Guard. I did an executive order last month to help out a request from Governor Abbott in Texas. They need more people. There's sections of the border which were just completely unguarded. I was down there with our troops, and in the first 30 days, they were involved in 30,000 apprehensions. You're like, how is that even possible? Well, it's because in the section they were in, people were just walking up to them and said, we were supposed to go to the guys with the camo on. You know, and then there's another 60 miles in this 90-mile sector where there was no people. I go, where'd the Border Patrol? Well, they're back, you know, processing paper. So I go talk to the leadership there, and they're all demoralized. They have no support from Washington, D.C. The president took 2 years to get down there. People are retiring as soon as they possibly can to get out of it. I mean, any organization that's got a law enforcement responsibility needs to feel some support, you know, from the leadership. They feel no support from the leadership. So it's so again, some parts of the federal government could shrink, other parts we need to get more people there. They're pulling people. We have 18 border crossings with Canada and North Dakota. Some of them are still shut down and they're blaming COVID, but I know they've pulled people off of that to put them on the southern border because they're short-staffed all the way around. Well, if, you know, nobody's going to choose a career to go into that field when they're being maligned by the party that's in charge, right? Who would want to go work for that kind of an organization? So we've got to restore respect for law enforcement, for the military, and that includes Coast Guard and the border. In addition to the border, I mean, Coast Guard plays a big role. Ports, some of these drugs are coming in through the ports. And just building a wall isn't the only answer because, again, you know, there's people flying ultralights over the top of the wall and dropping packages on the other side. We've got to have, you know, a sophisticated technology for detection for what's going on. There's a way to acoustically understand if an ultralight's flying. I mean, all of these, American innovation will solve all these problems. So, but we in North Dakota, what we also did in our cabinet group is we said, hey, we're gonna take out all of the, you know, anybody that was running a cabinet had a opportunity to reapply. That meant resign and reapply. If you wanna work on transforming government, you can stay. If you wanna run the status quo, we thank you for your service. There's a job in the private sector waiting for you. So we got a group of people energized around a mission: improve lives, inspire success, empower people. If we're not doing those 6 words in every agency, and if we're not aligned and coordinated, we put in a whole strategic planning process, got everybody moved in the same direction, and we've dramatically increased the efficiency of government. I mean, I'm telling you, coming from the software side, federal government is 20 or 30 years behind where it could be, and so there is an opportunity to reduce spending and not affect services.
I got a question, and I'm gonna read it because it's from our son-in-law. So our daughter's from Hawaii. He just retired as a colonel, but anyway.
Thank you for your service.
Anyway.
What branch were you in?
He was. Yes.
Oh, he was, okay.
He was.
Okay.
I'll pass
Well,
it
tell
on.
him thank you.
I will.
Anyway, we just said we were gonna see you today, and he must have been thinking all night. Anyway, his question was, how should the U.S. respond in the event that China blockades Taiwan instead of an outright invasion?
Well, this is something we hope doesn't happen, but could happen, and part of what, you know, the best way to prevent something like that is to have strong deterrence in the first place, and as I said earlier with energy, to have some leverage. If they're getting no oil and gas from the U.S. and they blockade Taiwan, then what are we gonna say? Oh, we're gonna stop sending oil and gas? Oh, we don't get any from you. We get it all from everybody else. We're getting all of our oil and gas from Russia. So we'll just move, you know, like Putin did, with impunity, because they don't need anything that we have. You know, if we have strategic dependence on the Chinese economy and they have no dependence on ours, we've got no leverage. So part of it is we have to, you know, use our strength, compete from our strengths, and part of that is gonna be around innovation, technology where we lead, and part of that's gonna be around what we can do with clean energy in this country, because we can truly have true energy independence. We've gotta make sure that we've got Taiwan is militarily prepared and that there's enough deterrent there so that, like what's happened in Ukraine, where Russia might now have a second thought. They're like, wow, we didn't just roll over Ukraine like we used to. I'm sure China is looking at that and saying, wow, maybe this won't take 3 days to take over Taiwan. Maybe we'll get stuck here, you know, in this long, you know, battle for years over that. So we have to, you know, strength through peace. Ronald Reagan, it actually works, which is make sure that we've got our allies, whether it's Taiwan, South Korea, Philippines, Japan. You know, we have to support all of the allies in the Pacific, and we've got to have partnerships. I mean, Australia and New Zealand are key to what we're doing. Catherine and I were on a trade mission in Japan in October. North Korea fired a missile over the top of Japan the week we were there. Okay? Japan's got no missile defense. Missile defense comes from North Dakota, comes from the Minot Air Force Base, if it's going back the other way. So what is Japan doing? They're saying, hey, well, we've got 126 million people living in a space that's twice the size of North Dakota, and they have no oil and gas, and they're worried about getting cut off because of what might happen. A blockade in Taiwan basically means that none of those tankers are maybe making it to Japan. They're stockpiling Australian coal in the ground in Japan. They're doing that because they can't count on us as an ally to provide them with the energy. And you can't get a pipeline built from the Permian in Texas, New Mexico, or the Bakken in North Dakota and Montana to the West Coast, and Japan would say, hey, we'll buy all the liquid natural gas the US could sell us. If there was a way to offload it from the West Coast, they'd have a secure supply chain that would go up along British Columbia, the Aleutian Islands. And so, I mean, some of this stuff is a no-brainer to me, but we've just completely abandoned our allies, and that's why we're facing this global stability right now. Somehow we thought that we could let all of our allies, you know, be dependent on our adversaries, and then somehow then they'd still listen to us. You know, it doesn't make any sense. So we're behind. I mean, we're at risk in Taiwan. We may or may not be able to stop what's already happening because of the strategic mistakes we've already made, but we got time to catch up, I hope. Sir?
I think it's great that we've got someone from the private sector willing to run for president. I think I see an opportunity here with someone like you're running a software company, and the efficiencies that have to go behind the scenes and our federal government being just so inefficient. I think the cost benefit opportunity here, if you can speak to that a little bit about bringing efficiency to the government. That's number one. And secondly, you speak about national security. I think we've got to declare the drugs terrorism. They're trying to wipe out generations of our country. I mean, we've experienced it. So I think we got to do something a lot stronger than we're doing today. Put every asset that we've got to stop COVID, the biological warfare, and this man-made fentanyl from coming in and wiping us out, because they're gonna weaken us and take us over.
No, they are, and it's destroying our cities, and these are large criminal enterprises. This is not, you know.
But what none of the politicians talk about is, we talk about the border crisis, obviously, right? That's one spot that we need to control. But we've gotta do something more in each community with these local drug dealers, and I'll share a little bit of our history. We lost our son to fentanyl 2 years ago. So, in talking to the police in that community, you know, they can't get into his cell phone, because the cell phone and Facebook Messenger, I know, hold all the secrets to who sold him the drugs, right? And they can't get into his Apple iPhone, because Apple doesn't allow anybody to, even though there's a death, which is wrong. I mean, we're talking, in our eyes, we're talking murder. Other people might think it's something else, but to us, it's murder. When somebody deals drugs that are knowingly going to kill somebody because of that tiny little bit of fentanyl that's in there. The response from the police force is, ma'am, there's nothing I can do, because for every drug dealer I take out in our neighborhood, 2 or 3 more are gonna come into their position, and our court system is not gonna hold them accountable. That's wrong. That's wrong. We're losing, you know, you
So
say
now we're allowing to wipe out
110,000 a year?
generations.
It's more than that. And it's growing every single day in the United States and in our little communities. We see it every day. And it's like, at a community level, more has to be done, a lot more. Our judges can't lie silent to this and just slap people on the wrist and say, well, sorry, but Johnny sold drugs and killed 5 people in the community, you know, Johnny's gonna go on probation or whatever. I mean, if that, we've gotta hold them accountable at every level.
Agreed. And some of them are on probation, and then some of the people that have got nonviolent possession crimes are serving time. I mean, we got it completely flipped, so then we're spending, $45,000-$50,000 a year to house somebody in a correction system that actually needs recovery treatment, or maybe they need some other help.
They need a lot.
But then we're going after the organizations or the dealing. So we spend so much on the criminal justice system in the wrong spot.
Absolutely.
In North Dakota, we're trying to flip that. We've got a bunch of programs where we're trying to make sure that we're not, I mean, war on drugs would be great if you're going against the drug organizations. If the war on drug is against the person who has the disease of addiction, well, then you're like, then you're turning, you know, like someone who's got diabetes into the enemy combatant.
Absolutely.
And that doesn't make any
The
sense.
drug dealer doesn't care about them.
What's that?
The drug dealer doesn't care about them, so we gotta get the drug dealer, the
Yes.
system, we've gotta get the hierarchy out of there.
Yes.
And that's what we wanna see here, how are we gonna do that?
Yeah, well, part of it is we have to treat these organizations, because the source, again, these are large multinational criminal organizations, the drug cartels, or whatever you wanna call them, they're super powerful. And we have to take more coordinated action, and in some of these cases, the federal government, this is a place where the federal government does have to lead. You know, we've seen it in North Dakota, the federal government is responsible for law enforcement on the tribal lands. All of the big drug organizations in North Dakota are on tribal lands because they know that's a hole in the seam, or that's the safe place where they can go. And we did a coordinated event called Operation Blue Prairie a couple years ago, which was federal, state, tribal. 55 people arrested on the same day because they were leaving Detroit on Amtrak. Drugs came into the country through the southern border to Detroit. From Detroit, they came back up to the northern plains, and they would get, Amtrak's got no TSA. So you get on Amtrak with a bag of pills, a bag of cash, and a bag of guns, and nobody checks you.
Same with buses.
Yeah, and then they would get off next to the 3 tribal reservations, Spirit Lake, Turtle Mountain, and MHA, and then off and away, you know, young women disappearing. There's 6,000 missing and murdered Indigenous women. Some of those are coming off these reservations, being trafficked back places like Detroit. And when we did the sting that day, and 55 people arrested, and one of the cars with one of the drug dealers was a Detroit policeman, I guess on vacation in North Dakota, you know. I mean, so it reaches even, you know, I mean, the money that they have is so powerful, and the leverage they might have, maybe they've got, you know, something on that police officer's family. I mean, there's just, I mean, these aren't just like neighborhood gangs, these are big organizations, but agree, we've gotta do something, and it has to be at the community level and at the border level, but most of all, from Catherine and I, we're so sorry about your loss, because we meet people everywhere we go. Whenever we bring this up, we meet somebody.
This is everywhere.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. Well, thanks for being here today, and thanks for helping us work towards a solution. It's gonna take everybody. Okay, another question?
Can I ask a second one?
You may, yeah.
So since, do you see as Washington DC as being like a epicenter, a cesspool of corruption? Even, do you think, what's the answer to that? Or is it feasible to move the center of federal government maybe out to North Dakota and use, just get it out of Washington DC? It's just so much, and the justice, you talk about the drug cartels being so evil. Do you think that the federal government, the Justice Department, is really any more virtuous or honest than the drug cartels? Aren't they all playing the same game, trying to outdo each other in wiping us all out as citizens? You know, I was just talking to someone who was in the January 6th inside the Capitol for 20 minutes when they opened the door for him, and he's facing 25-year sentence or whatever for some kind of trespass, perhaps. And he says there's thousands of people that they're trying to convict of this in Washington D.C. So the justice system is totally upside down, and it's just permeating all over the place. You know, do you really think you're up to this task, or are you? What makes you think you can make a dent in the vast scope of corruption that has permeated our entire federal government?
There's multiple questions in there, and let me go to the first one. I think the idea of distributing government agencies outside of Washington D.C. makes a ton of sense. I mean, you've got a capital city that in most elections votes 95% for one party. I mean, there's not diversity of thought politically in that community, and if you're gonna hire in that community, then you end up with a strong bias in the bureaucracy. Secretary Zinke did this when he was Secretary of the Interior, and he moved BLM out of Washington to Colorado, and everyone's screaming and hollering. BLM doesn't own any land in the eastern part of the state. All of the Bureau of Land Management land is in the western part of the state. Wouldn't it make sense to have the, you know, the headquarters in Colorado? And he didn't pick Denver. I mean, he picked western Colorado, you know, place that be, you know, attract people that care about the land, that wanna work on the land, that would live in an area where they, you know, could relate to the states and relate to the governors. I'm the former chair of Western Governors Association, and all of us as Western governors deal with this problem that you don't have out east, which is federal government owns a ton of land. I mean, they own, you know, almost 70% of Utah, 50% of Wyoming. We battle it every day. I mean, these federal land use regulations really matter, and so that was a smart move, and I think we should keep doing more of that. Your question about the depth of corruption, I mean, people talk about term limits. Maybe there should be term limits for bureaucrats. I mean, I think there's a, you know, people get entrenched in these agencies and get entrenched in there, and then they just, hey, I can outweight the leader. Yeah, this person might be here for 4 years, but I'll outweight him. The way to drive the change, and you're asking, are you up for it? I mean, any organization that I've ever been involved in where you've said, hey, if you got a broken culture and the company's not making money and you got to do a turnaround, which I've been involved with, if you got to do that, well, then it always begins with leadership. You got to change leadership, and it was a missed opportunity in, you know, back in 2016 when Obama came in. He took the top, everybody he could, all the political appointees that were there from the Bush era gone, all new appointees, and they got them moved in. You know, when in 2016 when our party got the presidency back, I honestly think they weren't expecting to win. There wasn't a plan. There wasn't a transition plan. There's a thing called the 5th year of the presidency, and it's not the year after you're president, it's the year before. Our organization, we will have spent the time in 2024 building out the team to be able to do that, and it's common sense. It's done before. There's people that I know that have worked in federal government level before that are working, literally writing the book on how to do this, so that when you hit the ground running, you've identified these are the 80 people, you know, in the Department of Interior that are political appointees, as opposed to like, you know, then after you're inaugurated in January, then you post the position, 2 years later you get approved, you know, thing. You've got to hit the ground with the leadership changes. Then we've got to drive some people towards retirement. I mean, there's a lot of baby boomers that have been there a long time, and we, in any organization, they're hanging around for their pension. In North Dakota, we gave people the opportunity to retire early, and here's an interesting financial attractive thing for you to decide to leave now, and thank you for your service. And then we also got the pension fund changed. In North Dakota, we got that done this spring, so we've eliminated the defined benefit pension plan, so that people that are in government, they're gonna have an attractive 401k plan. They're gonna be there because they love the work and they can make a difference, as opposed to, I hate my job, but if I stay another 20 years, I'm gonna have a great pension. And then we've systematically said, hey, every one of these jobs in government, people in government are just like in the private sector. You find people that are overworked and underappreciated. We put in a recognition program for all the people that are doing the right stuff and doing great work and innovating. And they've never had that before. So a little appreciation, recognition, you know, can absolutely go a long way. We never had a chief people officer before in the state of North Dakota. I don't know what large organization doesn't have a chief people officer, and we didn't have any recruiters. I'm like, where are we posting? And they're like, I mean, they were posting like on a state website. What about Career Builder? What about LinkedIn? What about Monster? What about the half a dozen places where everybody posts? And I mean, we're doing that. And then in the recruiting, the only person that actually had recruiters was our, you know, fabulous, had it in general. The National Guard had 18 recruiters in North Dakota, and the rest of the state government had 0. We were just like post and pray, hope somebody wants to work, you know, and then every one of those jobs in government, 10 or 20% of it has got some soul-sucking, repetitious thing that you're supposed to do because somebody passed a law 30 years ago and they're required to make a report that nobody reads. When I say red tape reduction, that's what we went through. Those 51 bills we passed, we stopped that stuff. So then we've just freed up. We can free up 10 or 20% of everybody's time. If you can free up 20% of every federal employee, that's like 400,000 employees that can go back to the private sector, or 400,000 people that are happier, you know, every day because they're not doing something that's not adding any value to America. So it's just, this is all common business sense that, and I've actually done it before multiple times, and now we've done it at the state level. So I know that it can work. But what you're describing is a huge challenge. But just, you know, putting out tweets and clickbait is very different than actually understanding how to be an operational leader, which I've done, to actually go execute. That's very different than just tweeting about the problem and saying, oh, I'm gonna fix it. No, you have to actually know organizationally how to move it ahead. That's what leadership's called, and that's what we do. Ma'am?
If Trump should win the primary, will you vote for him?
I voted for him twice, and if he's running against Biden, I will absolutely vote for him again. I mean, it's like, it's just a, yeah, I mean, it's just, that's a
Well,
no-brainer.
a lot of people say it's a no-brainer, but quite a few people don't like Trump, so I'm just curious.
Yeah. Elise?
So with so many people running in the Republican primary, what makes you different? Why should we vote for you instead of anyone else who's running?
Well, the first question, I wanna just challenge the premise, because I hear this all the time, and I heard this before we announced, like, oh, it's such a crowded field, it's a crowded field, it's a crowded field. It's the most important job in the world, and at the time we announced, like 9 people had applied. And I'm like, when I was in the private sector, if we had the most important job in the company and we posted it, 9 people applied, the first thing we'd say is, well, we better repost. Particularly if some of the 9 people hadn't done the job, or done anything like the job, or had never, in this case, some of the people have never created a private sector job or worked in the private sector. You know, like, okay, then, so what is the real pool for this job? It's not even as many as are announced. I mean, if you're really saying that's the qualifications for doing it. So I don't think, take a university in North Dakota, we post for the University of North Dakota, and everybody was delighted that we had 35 people apply for the job. I said, how many of them have been a university president before? They said, oh, like 3 of them. I said, well, that's interesting, because we've got a law school, a med school, and 12,000 students, and there's 10,000 universities in America, and only 100 of them have a law school, a med school, and more than 12,000 people. So the other 9,900 sitting presidents, only 3 of the other 9,900 sitting presidents want to apply for this job. Again, like, we didn't market, we didn't recruit, you know. So in this case, I'm sure there's hundreds of people that could actually do the job of president, and that I might look at them and say, hey, if they're running and they're gonna win, I don't have to go do this. But there aren't, the good people that know how to do this work are not running, because the system is so brutal on families and on everybody else, they don't do it. So we said, hey, this field's not crowded. And when we started Great Plains, I went to the first trade show, and there were 64 accounting software companies in the trade show book. I thought there was gonna be 10, so little miscalculation. You know, I bet the farm, I get there, we got this covered, hey, but there turns out there's, you know, 6 times more competitors than we thought. Well, you know, we started out and said, we just have to tell our story. We gotta do what we have to do. So competition we're not afraid of. We think competition's good for the party, it's good for America, and it's good for getting results. But on the why, vote for us, people have to make their own decisions. If you think the issues that, and our skill set, and you think the issues of the economy and energy and national security, if you think improving the life of every American, unleashing the best of America, if that matters to you, then I would vote for us. If you say, hey, I want someone who's done the private sector jobs, that knows how to do this, that has a shot, that cares deeply about people and families, you know, then we're the one. And then I can't describe why, you know, let everybody else can make their pitch on why they think they would be the one to do it, but I think we've got what America needs right now, and we're putting it out there, and we're gonna make sure everybody knows who we are. And we know that if we get this job, we will be able to do the job and do it well. That I know. Sir, in the back?
Yeah, what can be done about the unequal justice system in this country? You know, it's like the Clintons and the Bidens don't seem to go by the same rules that the Trumps go by. And we talk about it, we as Republicans talk about it. Talking doesn't seem to be fixing it very much.
Well, it's similar to the question that was asked over here.
Yeah.
And this is it's a huge problem, because right now, when we're traveling around, doesn't matter, North Dakota, Iowa, New Hampshire, we go anywhere in the country, and we've been doing events in other states as well as part of this thing. Everywhere we go, people, if we don't trust the foundational institutions that support our democracy, then we've lost faith in democracy. Then we start losing our ability to say we can actually exist as a country. I never thought in my lifetime I'd be saying that, but everybody's worried, and should be, about a 2-tiered system of justice, that there's one set of rules that are applied one place and another set of rules applied to another. And that's a huge concern. And in terms of, as president, you know, I would just say, hey, look, we are, we will be changing leadership at the DOJ for sure. I mean, absolutely, you've got to go in and change leadership. We also have to change culture, and we have to figure out a way to rebuild. We have to, you know, rebuild trust. You know, and some people ask me, you know, would you you know, agree to pardon President Trump? And I said, well, hey, I have pardonability right now as governor in our state, and it would be, why are you guys asking me? Because I can do stuff in the state, and you're asking me about what I pardoned somebody for 2025 in North Dakota when they haven't even been convicted yet. You know who should be asking? Joe Biden could pardon right now instead of turning the justice loose, you know, on his competitor, you know, and having it, you know, look the way that looks. He could be saying, hey, we want this to be about our future, not about our past, so I'll just pardon him so we can actually focus America's discussion about our, you know, our real competitors. He's never gonna do that. I mean, this is so anyway, we've got to restore trust in these systems, and we gotta be focused on the future. Our real, you know who loves it when we're fighting between each other? Who loves it? China loves that. China thinks that's hilarious. And you know, so does Russia, so does everybody else. So we, you know, part of what we're trying to do is focus on the future and make sure that we get this country where we can actually compete. And I'm looking to me like you might have served, sir. Did you serve in the military?
I was only in the Army Reserves.
Okay, well, anyway, thank you. I mean, you understand, I mean, when I think about, you know, people like my dad and others that, you know, fought for this country, and I thought about them a lot yesterday, and think about, I mean, I was talking to almost a 90-year-old veteran yesterday in Merrimack at that pancake breakfast, and he said to me, I never thought in my life that I would see the country where it is today. And that breaks my heart when I hear someone like that who's, you know, served the country. We've got to get this thing going on the right track again, and people have to trust the system. They don't right now, and they have good reason not to. Doug?
Yes, sir. So your people have told me that it's time to get going, or else you're going to be late at your next event. And I hate to cut you off because it's been fascinating to have this opportunity and to give people a chance here in Belknap County to ask questions. So I just want to thank you for coming and visiting our business and spending time with the folks here in Belknap County.
Well, I
And
wanna
we
say
hope to have you back.
On behalf of Catherine and I, Giselle is hiding in the back there. Come on in here, Giselle, so people can see you. But Doug and Giselle, their daughter Elise, all your team members here at DGF, we really appreciate your hosting us today. It's been great getting your questions, and I think we've got some palm cards out there, but if you want to learn more, DougBurgum.com. We appreciate your coming out today. We love New Hampshire. We love the fact that this is a place where people get engaged, and I just want to say the work that you're doing really matters. That election next February that's going to happen in New Hampshire, where you go to the polls and decide, you know, who you think is going to be the candidate to represent our party. It's a super important election. It's super, super important, and I really appreciate everybody thinking carefully about it and saying, you know, what's the best way for us to find a way forward to solve some of these problems that we need to solve, and we can't solve them by just, you know, shouting at each other. We talk, you know, we have to talk to each other. We've done some of that problem solving in North Dakota, getting everybody involved. And when Catherine and I ran, one of the things we said, you know, how do you win an election 80-20, or how do you win an election, you know, over 70-30? Well, when we ran, even the places we went to that was solid Democrat country, one of them said, well, we don't think you're gonna win. I said, why? Because you're spending a day campaigning here, and we don't vote for Republicans. He said, yeah, but if we win, you still drive on our roads, your kids still go to our schools, you still get our health care, we've still got the same issues with addiction, and when we're governor and first lady, we're working for everybody. We work for everybody. That's what you do in the executive branch. If you wanna go to Congress, great, you pick one jersey or the other, you know, yell at each other for a living, do that. But when you're running the operation of the executive branch, you know, you run on a platform, people vote for you that care about what you care about, but the day you're elected, you're working for everybody. And that's the promise that we made then, the promise we'd make to America is we're gonna solve only some of these problems when we figure out, you know, that the neighbor down the street's not your enemy. The neighbor is, when we got a battle going on with China, we have a lot of people that literally are trying to, you know, erode America. I mean, they get up every day in places like Iran, and they want to destroy America. That's their goal. They, you know, destroy America and destroy our allies. And so, you know, we just have to remember, you know, what got us to where we are today, and that's what we're gonna do. But again, Doug, Giselle, Elise, the whole family, your team, thank you. Let's give them a hand. Thank you so much.